I mean, I've talked with pros about that, where they're like, dude, there's so much crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes that no one ever sees and we're not allowed to talk about. And, a journalist might hear, but like, oh, you can't put that in a story, or you can't have a camera in there.
This is Andrew Vance, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, where my guest shares stories about how doing hard things forges stronger, more resilient humans. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, or wherever you listen. Subscribe and forward it to a friend who likes doing hard things. My guest is journalist and former pro cyclist Ian Dille. Ian's stories explore topics including racial justice, gender equity, transportation, the environment, parenting, growing up, and more. Ian's long-form feature writing appears in outlets including Outside Magazine and Texas Monthly, and he's had stories reproduced by This American Life and featured on long reads. Previously, Ian was a senior producer for the streaming service FloSports, where he helped launch a cycling content platform, FloBikes. FloBikes broadcasts most of the world's biggest bike races, including the Tour de France. Ian led production teams, produced daily shows and features, and worked as an on-camera talent. Today, Ian tells stories using video, audio, and the written word. You can find Ian at iandille.com, that's IANDILLE.com, and on Twitter and Instagram at Ian Dille. As always, you can find those links in the show notes.
If you're an independent journalist, you have to look at yourself as a product and a business and everything all wrapped into one. And part of that is marketing yourself. And if you want more work, if you want better paying work, then you need to market yourself. How are people going to know about your shit? So yeah, I definitely, and I think I posted at some point. I thought about it for about a while. I think about a year when I returned to contracting full time, kind of what I was going to do with social media and my accounts and whatnot. Like, should I start a new account? Do I make my personal account my business account? Do I blend them? And ultimately, I decided, like my personal account, it's already like people that I'm friends with, but like also can employ me, or know people that can employ me. I'm like, why would I start a new account? Like, I want these people to see my stuff, and they do. I mean, they're invested in my stuff, and I'm invested in their stuff. So, yeah, it is interesting in terms of a community, a creator community, an artist community, a journalistic community. I don't know. It's a lifestyle and it's kind of all wrapped together. So, yeah, I posted something, I think with a Texas Monthly article that I had come out in the spring that was sort of just like, hey, I'm going to be promoting more of my work on this account, like share it. And then I've sort of been experimenting with, what people respond to, what I write about my work, how I share it. I've been taking more of my own content, like when I go on out in the field for reporting, bringing my fancy camera, taking photos. So like, I'm not trying to bum images off of other people or scrap together content or video or whatever else. Just being more cognizant of it and how am I going to tell the story about my story?
How do you think about the stories that you tell in relation to the channels or medium that you use to tell them?
I think I'm still kind of figuring that out, and it's kind of changing, right? Like, I was pretty early to TikTok for a person in their 40s. I mean, I remember my niece messing around with it when she was like 6th, 7th grader, and it was like relatively new. And I had just started working for FloSports, and I at the same time, she's like a 6th, 7th grader, and she's on this app where it's essentially teaching her how to film, edit, do transitions. And I'm like in my 40s, and I'm like, I, have this background as a writer and a journalist, But then I'm at like this, not a startup, but like essentially a tech company that's doing streaming and is predominantly doing video production. And I'm learning video production kind of at the same time as this like 12-year-old girl who's like, brilliant and I know is like a really talented artist. And I'm like, man, like that's super cool. Like, and she had showed me some of the stuff also that she was learning in school. Like, I think she was taking a film class at her middle school where she was like learning about different shots and panning and things like that. And I was just like, yeah, like, yeah, she's going to be a master of this medium, like until there's a new medium or whatever else, like, whatever, until like VR or the metaverse or whatever becomes a thing. And then we'll all have to learn something new. But yeah, I don't know. I guess, for me, it's, still a little bit of experimentation. And then also for me, it's more about, what the stories I'm going to tell, how I tell it. I think about that less and more about, what's good. Like, is this good or not? And whether it's a picture, a video edit, raw footage, are people going to respond to this? I think is how I look at it. And then each platform is like a little bit different. I know Instagram is like pushing reels now and whatever else, but yeah, I look at it a little bit that way. I think about, with like reels and TikTok, I think about tracks, like what track is going to pop. I think like the one TikTok video I have that like went kind of viral. I put it was when Cardi B's Up just came out and everybody was, doing their like, posting TikTok videos, dancing to Up, and like Cardi B was sharing them. And we were at this cabin we go to out in the hill country that's like really good for bike riding and bass fishing, which are two of my favorite things. And we were trying to open a bottle of wine, me, my wife, and my mom, and we'd forgotten a wine opener. And so we were like scrambling, how are we going to open this bottle of wine, right? It's like the age-old predicament. And we Googled it, and it was like you could use a bike pump with a sports needle and get it in the cork, and you can pump, and it pops the wine cork off. So I handed the phone to my mom, and I was like, Mom, film this for TikTok. And like, like one or two pumps, and the cork popped right off. And so it's just like, I don't know, this raw like 8-second clip. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'd been thinking like, oh, well, I like this song. I was like, I can't dance. I mean, I can dance quite well. That's something people don't know about me, but I can't dance well enough. Or maybe I just don't have the confidence yet to, film myself dancing. And so, I put that track to that clip, and, it's like, I don't know, 250,000 views or something, which is like not a lot, I guess, in the TikTok verse. But I don't know. I was kind of proud of that.
Ian, I thought you were going to tell me that you somehow found a way to use a bass to open a bottle of wine. That really would have been something.
Well, it's because then, you're hitting the wine community, you're hitting the bass community, you're hitting the hip hop, like, you're really, I'll think about that next time.
What a Venn diagram. I have to be honest, I didn't know that you were operating on TikTok.
Oh, really? Yeah, no, yeah. Follow me on TikTok, Ian Dille.
How long have you been on there?
I think right after I left FloSports in like early spring 2021, I got on TikTok. and just started like messing around with it. I haven't posted something there in a while. But it's cool. I mean, I like the platform, and yeah, it's interesting. It was cool to just learn something different and new, kind of like using some skill sets that I already had and applying it to that platform.
Using tools like TikTok, playing around with Instagram Reels, Twitter, whatever the case may be, as you said, if you're a creator, you're making things, but also you're the product. You have to market yourself. And from doing that and exploring that more, have you picked up any new skills or storytelling techniques that you've transposed into, say, long form written journalism?
I mean, for me, I think it's mostly just being, I don't think that's a good question, because I don't know if I've transposed certain storytelling techniques. I might, now that you mention it. Like, oh, this person is doing an interesting thing with, how they structure this tweet or whatever else. Um, but, but I mean, it is helpful just in terms of like, for me, like, just what people are interested in, and like, kind of like where popular culture is sitting, and what the various takes are, and all of that. So yeah, I think I use it more just in a way to like, it's kind of I like, so social media has a way of shrinking our worldview if we don't use it correctly. If we let social media control us instead of controlling social media. And so I've sort of tried to flip that and like use it to broaden my worldview and exposing me to things that I wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. And so I think in that way it does filter into my work, just because I'm putting in perspectives and viewpoints and ideas that I might not otherwise have come across had I not sought them out really on social media.
And since you decided to move on from FloSports, your focus has really been on longer form work, predominantly written work. Why did you want to move in this direction with your storytelling, and what do you like about long form work?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of goes back to like, I started out in journalism, like that was always just what I was drawn to, was feature writing. And, the write, ever since I was like a kid or whatever, like fourth, fifth grade, like you turn in essays and your teacher's like, this is really good. You're like, oh, I like that. Like, I like that feedback. So I'm going to keep doing more of that. Like, and I like doing it too, right? Like you like doing it and someone is like, I enjoy consuming this. Like, okay, I'm going to keep doing that. And so it was always like real natural for me, I guess, to follow writing. And then I think, journalism, it feeds curiosity. I was always someone that sort of questioned why, like that would get in trouble for like asking, like, why do we have to do that? Why is that way? Like, I would never just be like, oh, you said to do that, so okay. I'd be like, that doesn't make sense. Like, let's sit down and explore this a little bit. Like my kids will do that to me and I'm like, no, I just need you to do the thing that I need you to do. But I'm also like, you got that from me. So I think that, journalism and writing, they definitely come together in that way. It is interesting. Like I've never really had that much interest in, I probably haven't done like any sort of like fiction writing since I was in, like elementary school. So I was like on high school journalism staff and studied it in college. And And so, yeah, I mean, I don't really have like an answer in terms of like, or maybe I did answer it, like why that's kind of what I've chosen to pursue, but that's just always kind of been my pursuit. And I think, I guess up until I worked for FloSports and helped them launch their cycling platform FloBikes in 2017, I was very like single-mindedly pursuing, sort of this. I mean, it really is a niche form of long form journalism, narrative journalism, and in print as a writer. And I had done some exploring. Like I did an internship with our public radio station here in Austin, KUT, and I was like a 30-year-old intern there, and just because I wanted to learn audio storytelling techniques, definitely listened to a lot of long form audio stuff. Like I think we all kind of grew up on This American Life, and so for me, I don't know. It's definitely always been kind of my first love and my passion is writing, and then going to FloSports and learning a lot more about video production was cool in terms of, I've always understood that like writing isn't just print, like writing is the backbone of everything. And so it was cool seeing how you can use writing in different ways, even in like, it turned out my favorite thing we did there was like creating a show and seeing how writing fed into even sort of the free form dialogue of a show.
How did it?
Well, we would like, script. We would have like a run of show, and like have like bullet points and all of that. And we would write it out. Like and it would be there. We wouldn't reference it that much. But I think also sort of like if you look at backbone as the writing of everything, then like the backbone of writing is like to me, like the research and the knowledge and everything. So you're not going to write something before you know what you're talking about. So if you're going to have to write it down on like a run of show or a script, then like you have to know what the heck you're talking about. So that would sort of lead us to just, becoming better informed and knowledgeable and whatever else. So I guess it was really more process than anything. But yeah, I think like I'm doing, I guess since leaving FloSports a year and a half ago, I'm doing mostly print projects, just because that was the world to which I could most readily return and make a living or get paid for my work. And so, and clear, like, I enjoy the work, and whatever else, but I'm definitely less, I think, tied to print as like the only direction in which I want my storytelling career to go, or in which I want my stories to be told. So yeah, I have done like some video projects here and there and whatever else. But yeah, like, print is paying the bills at the moment.
And you've moved in a lot of different directions with the actual topics or subjects that you cover. But before we would jump into that, how do you think about cycling in terms of the types of stories that exist within the sport and that it generates? Is there anything unique about cycling in that regard, or is it just like all other sports?
I don't know, man. Like, to me, people that ride bikes are generally pretty interesting.
Why is that?
It draws a certain personality type. It seems, for sure. It's not totally like skate or surf culture where it's this sort of, I don't know, like nonconformist. Um, and who's to say that those sports are like nonconformist anymore anyways? But um yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess you can't like there's not any single personality type that's like drawn to people who ride bikes, and like maybe that's what makes it so interesting is like you're like, oh, we should all, and there are certain elements of it that they're like, oh, we're all alike and kind of enjoy the same things or whatever else, but also not, man. I don't know. I just remember like when I really committed to like, I guess identifying as like a cyclist, like bikes were my thing. And that wasn't really till I was like 19 or so, like in college. I definitely remember being like, and kind of forming a group of friends around bikes. I was like, man, these people are awesome. This is great. Like, and so I just think to me at least, like there's just always so many good and interesting stories that come out of it. You know, I always kind of like hesitate to call myself like a cycling journalist because I like do write stories about or that have cycling in them. I also say like they're not about cycling; they're about people, but they have cycling in them, and I do that quite a bit. But I think that's just because I'm in the world in which those stories exist. And so I'm generally like the first person to see that story and be like, that's a great story. We should tell that. And take it to someone else and be like, let's tell this story. And they're usually, or sometimes maybe half the time they're like, that is a good story. Let's do that. So yeah, but you know, like I grew up reading Sports Illustrated, ESPN magazine, whatever, Thrasher, Transworld Surf, like, yeah, there's great stories in every facet of life and every culture. Yeah, for me, it's just bikes is more my thing than other elements.
Cycling certainly is a sport that is full of characters,
Yeah.
I would say, right?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I don't know why, but something that was on my mind as I was thinking about this conversation was kind of there's been this convergence, I think, of cycling and art a bit in a way that it didn't really exist, I think, in the maybe like the first 2 decades that I was involved in cycling. And, you know, you were involved in it at a higher level of competition than I was. But I think we see this convergence today. And in fact, when I was looking at your clips, you know, looking at the piece you wrote about ultra romance, but thinking about Lachlan Morton, thinking about Taylor Finney leaving the sport to pursue, I guess, art and music and whatever it is that he's doing now, including a sponsorship from Aura Ring for his bike packing. But what do you think is going on with cycling as a mode of self-expression or its convergence with artistic pursuits? Is that something that you've noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's always been a facet of it, you know. But at like, you know, but yeah, maybe more so. Let me think about it a little bit. I'm going to start sort of like with a specific example about ultra romance because I think that was kind of one of the first people that just took that I came to know that took the aesthetic and the look of it and really prioritized it, you know? Kind of when I was racing at the, I guess, elite domestic level or whatever, like there was certainly a look and like you wanted to look dialed and you wanted to look fast and all those things, but like it was also a certain like persona that you were trying to portray, I guess. but it wasn't necessarily unique. It was almost like a fake it till you make it type thing. Like,
what was that persona? Is that like Oakley M frames, like dialed, like super polished, pro looking?
yeah, just real clean, And well, that's totally not. I guess that's not entirely true because like I always had like a big like I kind of had like a little afro, like shaggy hair. And then like I was on this like elite team where like everybody kind of had like shaggy hair, and it was kind of like a joke with like we were like a little bit of like the Motley Crew, and so like I guess I brought sort of like a little bit of like the Austin like slacker vibe to that look. It was like I'm gonna look clean and fast, and I'm gonna have like the pro look with like the sunglasses and the helmet, and it's mostly like, well, so the other thing, it's all like sponsor product that you're given, right? So it's not like there's few opportunities for individuality, and so and at that time too, like my hair wasn't thinning, so like I could have like a big like floppy fro or whatever, and I couldn't afford haircuts anyway, so it worked for me, but with like, I'll call him, he goes by a number of different names, but I'll call him Benedict. I think Ronnie Romance, Ultra, whatever you want to go with. That was interesting because he saw, sort of this, he got into bike packing, but then he saw that like, how is anybody going to take this kind of emerging facet of cycling interesting, and I say recent or maybe re-emerging, because like bike tourists look dumb. Like the stuff they were doing was super cool. Like my dad subscribed to Adventure Cycling, and I would read that and be like, man, that's a cool trip. They're going cool places, blah blah blah. But like, dude, panniers on the back of their bikes and like helmet mirrors, and it was just very practical. There wasn't a lot of, it was all function. There wasn't a lot of thought put into the form. And so seeing how Ronnie Romance thought, there was like, he thought, how is this gonna look? And then like, how can I make it work really well too? So yeah, like the design and artistry and all of that. And then again, like combining that with media. For him, it was photography. It all worked for him, and it's it's been cool to see his journey. And then like you said, Lachlan Taylor, my old friend Mike Friedman has a strong interest in art. So yeah, I think it's like it's cool. It's like I don't know. Maybe it is like the sort of the evolving coolifying of of cycling, and new groups coming to it and taking ownership, and bringing their own aesthetic and tastes and whatever else. But yeah, I don't know. I've seen it. I think artistry has kind of always been a part of the sport, but I think it's a more important part now, and maybe that has to do more with just how much more media is a part of the cycling universe now, and that it's rewarded.
Right, and we know the team that made F1 Drive to Survive, they're now producing a series about the 2022 Tour de France, and it's interesting that it's kind of this intersection of art and cycling. In cycling, I think having a bit more of a personality, the riders having more of a personality. We're definitely seeing that, I think, within the gravel community and other facets of cycling. At the highest level of the sport at the World Tour, I think not so much for a variety of reasons. And I'm really curious, given what kind of feels like a lack of personalities or styles, at least from the outside, how that show in the series is going to pan out. Because F1 Drive to Survive, is great because you have these really intense, exaggerated personalities that you meet, whether it's the team principals or the drivers themselves. And you've been very close to the sport at the World Tour level through the work you've done covering it. Do you think that this series is likely to produce the level of entertainment and drama that it will need to actually be engaging?
Yeah, so the people that race bikes at that level are crazy, right? We know that. Like,
say more about that. Like, I think the average person actually doesn't really. They're like, oh, that's neat. Like they eat well and like they go ride their bike. That's a real healthy, normal thing.
No, man, like these are F1 drivers that, you know, they don't have like helmets and safety protections and all this stuff. Like they're just in like little lycra singlets, and they could wear pads and stuff, but like it would keep them from going fast, and like going fast is the most important thing. So they're willing to literally like risk their lives on a daily basis in order to drive this machine as fast as they can using their own power, like their own human body power, right? And so, yeah, like I don't think we step back and look at it enough in just like how like unique and like kind of wild the sport is, especially at that level, right? And so if you're somebody that's like, I want to go do that. Like, I want to race my bike up and down mountains like over 6 or 7 hours, and like we saw it in the Tour this year with like Vingegaard and Pogacar, like taking so many risks on like the final mountain day that they're falling off their bikes, like crashing in gravel and whatever else. It's nuts. So like those people, yeah, like some of them, not everybody is like a big personality or whatever. There's definitely a lot of the top competitors that are a bit more reserved, quiet, introspective. But if you can get under the hood with those guys, like the shit they have going on in their mind is fascinating. Like it's easy as a journalist to just be like, just go for the guy that's giving the great quotes and always has something to say. And, but, the guys that are like a bit more reserved, yeah, if you can get them to open up, like they have a lot of interesting things to say. So, but the reason we don't get a lot of those stories or hear them is because, the sport's still struggling, and like, the teams are still struggling, and the structure of the sport is not financially stable. And, one bad quote, a little bit of bad press, revealing too much, if it goes the wrong way with a sponsor or whatever, like that can be the difference between, having a top rider or not having a top rider, like, staff getting paid or not getting paid, a big time sponsor coming on board or not. So my sense from having been there and having reported and worked in that space is like, those teams are just on like pins and needles all the time. And, the opportunity for major international exposure with a top production team, hopefully they'll, provide more access to some of those intimate stories. Clearly like F1 is, or Drive to Survive is like set the model that it works. But yeah, no, I mean, I've talked with pros about that, where they're like, dude, there's so much crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes that no one ever sees and we're not allowed to talk about. And, a journalist might hear, but like, oh, you can't put that in a story, or you can't have a camera in there, or like whatever else. But then, the athletes in that sport are like looking at Hard Knocks and other sports that are more stable and bringing fans the full story, you know, all the personalities, all that, and seeing like, oh, like that's engaging. People like these are humans, you know, they're not just robots riding bikes. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think they got it. Like, I think Netflix got it. I think that team got it. Like, and yeah, so yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see how it goes.
Just to throw out one, for example, I heard Bradley Wiggins, former Tour de France winner, he was on Lance's podcast during the tour this year. And to me, this just was an example of what you're talking about, kind of some of the things that are going on behind the scenes that don't come out until years later. I don't know if you recall in the Daniel Coyle biography of Tyler Hamilton, Tyler talked about, and if you're not a hardcore fan of the sport and you're listening to this, it's highly favorable to be as lean as possible until the point at which you start to lose your ability to produce power on the bike. So these athletes want to be as lean as possible. And I'm talking maybe 2% body fat during a grand tour, that's almost impossible to sustain that level of leanness.
If you're not doping.
Yeah, if you're not doping. Yeah. But so Tyler was doping at the time. And in addition to that, and I think this is not to be an apologist for doping, but riders perhaps dope, and in the past doped, and they also were working to their absolute limits as athletes for the most part. And Tyler was doing that. And he talked about, in order to be lean, he would go on, a 7-hour fasted training ride, come home, drink a liter of fizzy water, and take an Ambien. And I was like, well, that's wild. And so Wiggins goes on Lance's podcast and talks about how when he was preparing to win the tour, he actually, he didn't speak about other factors, but he said, yeah, like we were trying to train metabolic flexibility. So pretty regularly I would go out, I would go on a 7 or 8 hour ride in zone 1, really low wattage. We would stop every hour to have a scoop of protein. And then at the end of the day, I would drink a liter of fizzy water, take an Ambien, and go to bed. And then he talked about, or he intimated the toll that took on his emotional state, which cannot be a good one, right? If you're sitting on a bike for 8 hours a day, barely eating, and then drinking some fizzy water and taking an Ambien. So, there is a lot that doesn't get shared, because if he'd shared that at the time, that's just training, that's legal, but also that just, Ian, to me, that sounds kind of nuts, but like, right? That's what you have to do to win.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like those stories, and it sounds like, I don't know Wiggins, but I do respect him a lot, and even though he operated in sort of a gray area when he won his tour, but I kind of look at those sorts of stories as being somewhat dangerous to upcoming generations. I know it was dangerous for me and my generation. I was on the U.S. national team in 2001. During the height of the doping era, and you would look at guys like Tyler Hamilton as role models. Tyler was a collegiate cyclist like me. I think won a collegiate national championship at CU Boulder. Went on to race for U.S. Postal. Become one of the top riders in the world. Had this incredible pain tolerance. Finished the tour with a broken collarbone. I could just get incredibly lean and all these things. But that wasn't. A, it wasn't sustainable for him. B, he was cheating. And C, yeah, he wasn't really, it was a win at all costs mentality, which I don't think is healthy for the sport, long term, for young riders. And so, yeah, like maybe you get to a point in your career where you, with the guidance of, top performance specialists, doctors, who are doing things like legally and above board, and like, you might have to do some things that are strenuous on you, like physically and mentally, to achieve certain performance gains. But I think they should be open about that shit, man. Like, and the toll and the cost that it has on them, because like, that's crazy. And like, like, some like 15-year-old or 16-year-old or whatever, like, shouldn't be looking at that and thinking like, oh, that's how you get fast. Like, I see so many kids, I went through it when I was, racing at that level, like just thinking like you get fast by not eating. And that's not true. So, so yeah, I don't know. I think some of that and those stories and those sacrifices those guys made, did it actually help him win the tour? I don't know, man. I mean, you see it in the NFL, you see it everywhere, but like, I don't know. I don't really believe in romanticizing that stuff. And yeah,
I'm certainly not saying it's cool or that anybody should go do it. I just like, I heard that when I read the Tyler story, and then I heard Wiggins talk about it, which ostensibly was in a slightly different era of cycling. I was like, wow, that actually struck me as crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
they should. Well, I guess my point is like that's the stuff that should be in Drive to Survive and like and whatever else. And then it's like it's an opportunity to like have conversations about it, like we're having, like, and for other voices to come in and be like, hey, like that doesn't have to be the way. Like, Tade eats some shit, man. Like, Wout van Aert eats. Like, Matthew Vanderpool eats. Like, so yeah. Or like for Wiggins, like, yeah, like, I don't know, man. Like, if that's what you have to do to win a tour, like, maybe you don't win the tour. Like, go win Roubaix. I don't know, but it is interesting. It leads, yeah. I think, I guess to the point, like, we should hear more of those stories so we can talk about them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And during that era when covering World Tour cycling was one of your primary focuses, we did see a number of top riders really struggle from a mental health point of view. Marcel Kittel left the sport. I think that was probably while you were at FloSports. And then Tom Dumoulin was struggling. He's since decided to leave the sport. And even in 2022, I'm not close to Jumbo Visma and I don't know Jonas Vingegaard personally, but he just seemed to really struggle with being in the spotlight. That was just my observation, having spent a lot of time around a lot of famous people up close. Just the vibe I got was this guy is not doing well with the level of attention that he's getting during this race. And subsequently, that does seem to be the case. Like, he's kind of having to take a timeout right now. And I'm curious, will we see him back at the tour? I hope that we do. But not everybody's built, number one, for physically what you have to do to go compete at the highest level as a professional athlete. And number two, not everybody's equipped for the attention and intrusion that comes with that level of attention, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, it does also come down to having a good team. I mean, I know that Jumbo-Visma does have a strong media team, and those press officers are generally pretty good at managing the amount of media requests and whatever else that the riders are getting, and they see that the toll that it can take on them. But yeah, that's in cycling, that's, across a lot of sports. I mean, to me, it's just like anything, right? You have to, you have to work on your mental health, and that's something that you have to learn as you progress in the sport, right alongside the physical components, like, I was reading Serena Williams her father would have, when her and Venus were kids, would like pay bus kids in to shout as they were training, to shout like racial epithets at them and slurs. And he was just like, this is what you're going to deal with on tour as a professional. These, like, they were still little girls, but he was like, one day soon, you're going to be the best tennis players in the world. And the world is racist, and you need to be able to like still do your job in this world. So yeah, it is interesting, but at the same time too, like, Tom Dumoulin is, he's one of my favorite riders. A guy, I had the opportunity to interview him a handful of times, and he was just always so gracious and forthright and candid. And, good for him, like in terms of prioritizing his mental health over sport, I'm sure it's a really tough decision for him. And so, yeah, it's, I think the big picture for me is just, people talking about it and it like not becoming stigmatized. And, I think that's an evolution we've seen over the last, even just like recently, like over the last few years, it becoming a point of discussion because, I guess when I was pursuing the sport at an elite level, there wasn't, we didn't really talk about it that much that I remember explicitly, and, I certainly was nowhere near the level that those guys like a Jonas Vingegaard is competing at. But yeah, it is interesting. That's a component of it. One thing that I saw, kind of last note I would have on this, is like that I thought was cool over the last year is seeing Tadej Pogačar sort of come out of his shell and like, making some quips on Twitter and this and that, like showing a lot more personality. It's cool to see him be at a point where he's a little bit more comfortable with his, just being himself in public.
And he did drop a rap song during the tour. So, I mean, I think that's, which is actually a common trope now for professional cycling teams. I think WOW might have had a rap song as well. But Ian, I wanted to jump back to something you mentioned earlier. So getting to the work that you're doing currently and where you're headed, you mentioned that when you're thinking about what you might do in what channel, for you, it kind of boils down to your sense of what's good or your sense of story. What are the stories that attract you, and how do you know that it's good or something that you want to spend your time on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely just, I think first off, it's like a feeling, right? Like, oh, that's a good story, or you're just sort of like naturally like interested or attuned to it. And then, you kind of have to do the thing that like almost like kills the story for you, is like breaking it down into its component parts and being like, well, why is this a good story? Why does this work? Like, who's this character, or like, or whatever else.
How do you do that? Or what's your process like? Do you work, like, do you write in a notebook? Do you type? Do you do audio notes? Like, how do you think of talk to peers, mentors?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think like run it through my mind, and then, I think just like my friend group, like my wife, my kids, like whoever I can get to like listen to me, my mom, tell them, like, I mean, they know when I'm trying out a story on them and like seeing how they respond, and like
it's almost like being a stand-up comedian, kind of, right? Kind of trying out the material.
Right. So yeah, you kind of go through that. It is funny because you find yourself like telling the same story like to a few different people, like changing one thing or another subject, like changing the structure a little bit. Like you'll lead with something else or whatever, and then, and then like you write a pitch, at least like in the way in the line of for print stories. And really any story, like even when I was at Flo and I was there, I was internal, I was like an employee, and you still had to like pitch something to get budget and whatever else. And like, so then the pitch is sort of like what you pull from those conversations. You start doing a little bit more research and this and that. Like you call people up, tell them that you're thinking, you might call the subject, say you see something like on the internet, and then you're like, I'm going to talk to you and tell you like, maybe I'm working on this, I'm interested in a story before I pitch it. And then that's sort of like where you lay out some of the story beats, and whatnot. And then I think, and then you pull in too, like for me, and this is something I think, in my return to like long form journalism and moving away from like, just covering professional cycling, that like I've been, much more attuned to is like, like what are the equity components of this? Like, like where does privilege factor into this story? Like I was talking the other day with some friends about how I'm less interested in like the guy that does like the crazy trip around the world or like whatever else, because like it's like this manufactured struggle, it's like you come from, this, like that's a privilege to be able to like pursue an adventurous lifestyle often, right? And like, and you've sort of like self-created like this like manufactured struggle that you have to overcome, where it's like there's a lot of people out there actually like actually struggling to survive. Like, let's tell those stories. And so I think like I've definitely become more interested in stories that have a component of, social justice, racial justice, gender equity, like, just like journalism can be a solution, storytelling can be a solution to amplifying inequities in this world and, opening other people's perspectives. And so, those are the stories that I've been drawn most to currently.
And in your process, just to go back to process for a moment, do you frequently get stuck when you're in the process of crafting these stories? Or is that an uncommon experience for you?
No, for sure. Like a lot of stories will like sit on the shelf for a while until, they're missing something. And sometimes I'll pitch it and, it'll come back and that's like, oh, it's missing. Like it needs more work before it's like ready to be a viable product out in the world. And so, yeah. But like, I won't have time to work on that component of that piece right then, but it'll be like on the to-do list, it needs this, like find this person or do this research or whatever else. And so, yeah, I'll get stuck, but generally I come back to them. And if I don't, those stories I don't really remember. I mean, I guess they just weren't good enough.
What do you feel are the characteristics of a good story?
You stay engaged. Like, you want to know what happens next. It's enlightening. You learn something. As I mentioned, like your perspective is changed in some way. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like you feel something. And, making people feel something is really powerful. And so yeah, if you can make people feel one way or another, and also too, I think a good story, one person can feel one way and another person can feel completely different, and like that's okay, that's cool, but I think if it makes people feel something, then you're onto something.
And like all great journalists, you do a fantastic job of finding, I think, stories, perspective, and spaces that haven't been represented, stories that haven't been told. At the same time, you, like all journalists, sometimes are in a space where there might be a lot of different people telling that story. And we don't need to get into specifics here about things that you're working on, but I'm just thinking about how does that feel when you might be working in a space, a topic, a subject, it's very timely, and there are a lot of other people in the space. Does that inform your process at all? Do you feel any pressure or not?
Yeah, I mean, I quite like that. Like, I'm a competitive person, and I feel like if you're in a competitive environment where you're working on a story that you want to stand out and have an audience amidst a number of other stories on the same topic, then it drives you to work harder, to make it better, and yeah, to push yourself to look at a different angle, really listen to people to get it right. And so yeah, I live for that. Like, it's great to like have sole ownership of like some small story that like nobody else knows about, but like if you can also own something that everybody knows about, that's pretty cool too.
It is pretty cool. And when this is more of a technical question, but it's, again, something I'm really interested in as a journalist myself and somebody who podcasts. How do you approach interviewing, and what do you find to be effective?
Yeah, that's funny because, I remember like when I was, I guess like kind of starting out as a journal, pursuing journalism as a career. I remember like, reading a book that was like, got it from like the library or whatever, that was like, 10 key tips to interviewing, or like whatever else, like formational or fundamental interviewing techniques, like I learned things in like journalism school that, I've probably like forgot exactly what I learned, but I still do those things. I mean, I remember things from like high school that when, the tape is running, if someone says something interesting, like look at the time code and write the time code down so you can like go back and you know where it is. To like save the question that might end the interview until the end of the interview. Like keep rolling after the interview ends, because that is when the subject is gonna say how they really feel. So I think those are sort of like foundational, fundamental techniques. And then I think when you're comfortable with those things, and of course, like being prepared is critical. And if you're not prepared, then you should, I'm usually just like open about that. I'm just like, hey man, I didn't have time to like learn as much as I should have about this, but like, can you educate me a little bit so that we can get to the thing that I need to ask or whatever else. But then sort of like when you have those sort of like fundamental foundational techniques, then you learn how to have a natural conversation. And that is like where you get the best stuff, So, if you're so comfortable at interviewing that you can talk to a subject who's like critical to a story and, their information is, the basis of like what is going to make this story work or not, but you're not anxious, you're not tight, like you can just talk to them like they're a friend. Then I feel like it's generally going to be a good interview, and you're gonna get them to feel comfortable and open up and trust you. And then I think I think that is like the trust thing too is like I've thought about that quite a bit recently as well. Because I never ask people to trust me, but sometimes subjects will tell me like, "Oh, well, I trust you." I'm like, well, that's a lot you're putting on me, but that's cool. Like, I take that seriously, and so, yeah, it is like you stack it up, right? It's like you're, like if you mess one up, like that's gonna stick with you. And it's going to make it harder for you to get the next one. And so, yeah, I think just, part of that is just, on more like journalistic fundamentals is, just being ethical and honest. And I think those are techniques too, that I've had to learn to be more explicit about, people, like, they don't know, like, and the things that we made up, like in journalism, like off the record, on the record, on background, this or that, like you like explaining that to people and how it all works and whatever else. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't. Yeah, like you learn things or whatever, and I guess I've learned a lot, but it's good. I don't, this is good because I've thought about like, like how is my interview technique? What can I do better? Am I doing this right? What am I getting? What am I not getting? Could I have gotten better stuff? And, but yeah, I don't know. I would, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts, but I think that you've kind of you played in some of the same spaces that I have. I just find interviewing people when the end product of the interview is the actual product versus I'm eliciting information or having an interaction that's information I'll synthesize later into a different output, like a written piece. I find them to be really different. And, during my time as a communications executive, I found it to be really fascinating to see, just to observe the elicitation techniques, social engineering, and attempts at building rapport that I think some of the very best reporters in the world use that would not work well at all on camera or in an audio interview. In fact, it would be terrible. So that they're just like, they're really different things. I mean, that's one of the things that I do think about all the time.
Yeah. I mean, the worst thing to me is listening to myself interview somebody. I said 8 times before I actually got to the question, and it wasn't actually a question, but I mean, sometimes people respond to that, and I think it's okay in the way I work, right? Like where the question isn't necessarily part of the product. I'll just be like, I'm trying to ask you something here, but I'm stumbling through it. And are you getting what I'm asking? Because I can try and come at it from another direction. And, they'll be like, no, I get it. And, the answer, I'll be like, okay, yeah, but what about that? And so, yeah, that doesn't really work if the interview is the product. But I mean, one thing that we would do at Flo was sometimes we would interview like that. And sometimes I'll listen to audio interviews and I'll be like, yeah, they went back and cut that in, because they'll chop up the audio. So the answer is good, but then the question is so pointed and perfect. And I'm like, they didn't get that. They didn't get that great response. Cause we would go back and just VO the questions.
Right.
They would say something or answer something that you didn't even ask. And you'd be like, well, that won't work in this Q&A format. So yeah, we'll go back and VO in a question to set that up. So.
Yeah. Did you happen to watch the new McAfee documentary?
Mm-mm.
McAfee, the guy who invented the antivirus product, who then became the subject of an international manhunt because he allegedly killed his neighbor and was doing all kinds of weird things. But when he was a fugitive, a Vice reporter flew down there, and the thing that struck me was they just showed a bit of the process about when they're doing those sit-down 2-shot interviews for television or streaming or whatever. And they showed for the cutaway, they just had the reporter, and he was like, so they just got a bunch of looks, which again, I mean, people work in TV or doing video news, they know that that's just how it's done. But there's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes. It's not the polished product typically that you see. This format is different. I'm starting to do video, and now I'm like, okay, this is another layer. It's we've gone from playing the snare and the kick drum, now we're adding in some rototoms, and it's kind of a different ballgame. But no, that makes a ton of sense. Thanks for sharing that. And so, Ian, we've learned so much about you today. I know that one of the places people can go to learn more about you is TikTok, which I didn't know before. I should have been upfront about having not taken a deep dive into TikTok to research your presence. I'm looking forward to seeing that wine cork removal trick. I think my wife will like that, because if we've had that scenario where we didn't have a wine opener around, we didn't have a bass handy to remove the cork. If people want to learn more about you and follow your work, where should they go and what should they do?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter at Ian Dille, Instagram at Ian Dille, and TikTok at Ian Dille. Although TikTok I'm not really using for work very much right now. So I would say Instagram and Twitter are usually where I put stuff out, and then my website, iandille.com.
Awesome. Ian, thanks for taking time to do this a second time. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm grateful we got to have it.
Cool. Thank you, Andrew.
This is Andrew Votz. I just want to say thank you for listening to Choose the Hard Way. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, hit 5 stars wherever you listen, and leave a positive review. Go to choosethehardway.com to sign up for the newsletter, and share this episode with a friend who likes hearing stories about doing hard things. Choose the Hard Way is a Palm Tree Podco production. It is produced and edited by Anthony Palmer. Thanks to Emily Miles for digital support. The content for this show is created by me, Andrew Votz.